Welcome to Marketing Table Talk. I am Lisa Perry, your host. As a global brand marketer, I know firsthand the immense potential that lies within the world of brand partnerships. I am joined today by a trailblazer in brand partnerships, Christine Holland Carvalho. She is a VP in Partner Success at Arizona State University Enterprise Partners. She is and has an illustrious career in pivotal roles at Arizona State University and Coca-Cola, where she has transformed brands and led successful partnerships. Welcome to Marketing Table Talk, Christine.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, Christine, we have seen brand partnerships soar to new heights with the iconic collaboration with Barbie this year. What advice can you give companies that are looking to collaborate with brands for the first time?
I think the biggest thing is to understand that picking a partnership is like picking any other strategy. So there's always pros and cons to it, and you have to think about how you can manage the risk. And the risk is tougher to manage in the case of a partnership because it's not all internal to your organization. So, I mean, it's like a marriage in a lot of ways that it requires seamless communication, it requires aligned goals and objectives, and it's really comes down to managing the relationship at all levels of both organizations. So they can be really complicated. They can have, outstanding payouts. You mentioned Barbie. I think we've only seen the beginning of what the economic impact of Barbie is going to look like once we get through the back to school, Halloween, and holiday time periods. I think we'll see the real results, and there are probably more records to be set there. So they have 165 brands underneath the Barbie universe. Obviously, Mattel's already seeing great results, but lots of brands, lots of different categories.
You know, I love that as you framed it's like a marriage, right? And each person has their role to play. What lessons have you learned about maintaining a successful collaboration when there's different, each person has their own side, their distinct differences?
I think the more alignment you can have up front, the better. So I like to build long-term partnerships that are really aligned at the top. So at ASU, we look for local, national, and global partners that mirror our brand's pillars and are aligned to our charter and our mission of increased access and equity and inclusion. So when you start there, that's a good platform to base on. And then from there, really building out a collaborative plan together so that you're focused. You can't do everything. So focusing in on your joint messaging, focusing in on objectives for both sides, so both partners feel like they're getting a lot of value out of the partnership. I like to build 3-year plans so that the first year is the year we're executing programs together. The second year is in development, and we're working on fine-tuning what those initiatives are going to be. And year 3 is a little bit longer development, but it's a good time frame to give a sight line for both organizations. I pull out when I have someone calling me about a certain partner, I pull out the long-term plan repeatedly to tell my organization, here's what the priorities are with a given partner, and let's talk about if your initiative makes sense and fits in with their priorities, because not everything will. But again, back to communication and really understanding each other and what the needs are, I think is really, really key.
So you've got a company that wants to collaborate and partner with another company. I think people want to know, great, what's the first step? How to identify the right partner?
I think it goes back to understanding your strategy and what you're trying to accomplish. So for example, if you're looking to branch out to a new audience, or you're looking to innovate into a new category, let's say. A good example that I like from this year is the M&Ms and Krispy Kreme collaboration. M&Ms and Mars in general has done a really great job over the last few years of using consumer insights to drive flavor innovation. They've been launching seasonal flavors like mint and espresso at the holidays that you see, and they come in and out of the store during holiday time periods. This collaboration with Krispy Kreme, though, takes them into a new category that I haven't seen before. So I would assume that as it's getting a lot of press, I would assume as that is successful and we start to see the results coming out of that, that we see M&Ms innovate into even more categories. So it's a good example of using one brand's equity to expand into another category where you may not have experience.
Yeah, I love that, because what that does, right, is it drives a new consumer in, creates that sense of urgency, limited time offer. It's a great example of trying to identify what your business strategy is and then going after that partnership for that. I love that example. So you found the ideal partner, right? So how do you recommend leveraging the potential of that partnership to drive innovation for your products or your services? What would you do then? How do you go about that?
I think it comes down to both sides being very specific about the goals that they're trying to accomplish and what success, what does success look like? If we have a 3-year or a 5-year agreement, how do we want to visualize what the situation will be for both brands, how we're going to feel about each other, how we will have evolved our business, how we will have grown the business, entering new categories, that sort of thing. I think selection of a partner also really comes down to, like I said, what you're trying to accomplish. Another good but different example is when Coca-Cola wanted to innovate their fountain business. They partnered with, of all things, a design firm that worked with Ferrari. And the result is that really cool soda machine that you see in restaurants where you get to make your own beverage from hundreds of different options. It's sleek, it's innovative, it's super easy to use. They paid a lot of attention to user experience. It's fun. It delivers a fun consumer experience, and it gives them information on flavor trends. So it kind of is the holy grail. I know in my household, when we were deciding on restaurants, we had to go to the place with the cool Coke machine. So
Yeah, that's another amazing example where you've got a situation in your company where you need to solve a customer pain point, right? And one great strategy is going out and looking at partnerships to work with somebody to solve that customer pain point, to revolutionize. And they did it by disrupting the soda dispensing machine. Just a fabulous example of a strategic business approach. I'm curious though, you've got two companies, right? And they approach innovation in a different way. How does each, based on your experience, how does each company come to the table with a process of innovation and working together to be able to solve that?
that's kind of the holy grail. If it was easy, everybody would do it. It's challenging. I mean, there's a good line about a partnership being a sinking ship, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, but in a way, it's true. I mean, it takes alignment at the top, at the CEO level, and all throughout the organization on really anybody touching that partnership needs to understand how decisions get made in both companies. So who are the influencers? Who are the decision makers? How long does decision making take? Down to little details like how long is it going to take to get a logo approved? How long is it going to take to get a TV ad approved? All those sorts of things will come into play, and avoid frustration down the road when one side takes longer than the other. Aligning on your messaging really matters. Getting very clear on what are we trying to communicate together can make all the difference. The upfront work, I would say, the upfront work matters a lot in a partnership. So once you've agreed, I basically say you start with a plan to work together, an agreement to work together, and then you get into the details of the how we're going to work together and what exactly are we going to try to accomplish. So I like to build partnerships with kind of an over the top. We agree we're going to work together and we're going to do something, and it's sort of going to look like this. and then start to put a lot of detail into it about what those first 1, 2, 3 years are going to look like, what we're going to achieve initially, kind of crawl, walk, run type of approach. So let's do some things early on that are successful, and so both companies feel the power of the partnership, and then let's build on that in subsequent years.
And I can imagine that there are different handoffs within the organization. You're starting with one group of people at one point, and then that gets handed off through an execution phase. And I'm sure that there are so many people involved throughout the whole process of this that it's not one group that you're dealing with. Are there other key elements in this that you ensure that are included in this plan to ensure alignment and joint priorities?
I actually like to approach it a little bit differently, where the team managing the relationship is always engaged in any part of the conversation throughout the organization. So, for example, if I'm working with a partner and they want to run a co-branded TV ad, it's me or my team that's directly involved with our brand team to get approval for that, and helping our brand team to understand what are we trying to achieve through this partnership, what are the messaging elements that we're trying to get across, why is this partnership important to our organization as a whole. So that otherwise one of the problems I feel like you run into is you end up with so many tentacles throughout the both organizations, it becomes really difficult to manage. If you keep it focused where your relationship team is really always engaged, then I think it helps to keep the focus on the partnership and the priorities, and it helps to communicate the priorities throughout the organization.
I think that's an amazing tip for folks to make sure that there's one core team that's always engaged, so that you do have that stream of communication, that you're not losing the flow and having to start all over. Do you have any other advice or tips for folks as they're kicking off partnerships? Because there are definitely challenges in working with partners in a marriage, as you say, with this.
It sounds negative, and it's not intended to be, but just like you think about managing risk in your own organization and de-risking your own marketing plan, when you think about a partnership, you need to think about what's going to go wrong, and what is each organization's tolerance for the disasters that could happen. If you're partnering with a celebrity, they could have a DUI, or they could have some other PR type situation. Adidas ran into that with Kanye, and their stock price took a huge hit for it. If you're partnering with a team, the team could have a losing record. They could have some, executive scandal or something else going on. If you're partnering with another brand, they could go bankrupt. They could get bought. All sorts of things can happen, and you really have to understand what needs to get captured in the contract, so that both sides do have an exit strategy if needed. What's the mitigation plan? Just how to think through those communications on both sides. What's the tolerance on both sides? It definitely still comes back to communication, but thinking about the downside and the risk up front really matters. I think I'll add on to that. A lot of organizations with COVID found themselves just in a completely unprecedented situation of how do we think about the assets that we might have with a university or a sports team that's now no longer playing, or even playing in front of empty stadiums, and so the impressions that we were counting on are significantly lower. I feel like a lot worked through that with extending contracts or other make goods and that sort of thing, but for a while there it was really, really challenging, because on the one hand side you had brands saying, well, I'm just not going to pay you for this, and I'm getting all my money back, right? And you had teams and universities saying, well, wait a minute, I still have a business to run, so how do we figure out how to meet in the middle?
So for somebody that's new into brand partnerships, how can they think through those mitigating risks? Because you bring up an excellent point. If I'm new to this and I don't know what to think about those, how do they think? Is there a place to go, or how do they? If you're not an expert into it, like I wouldn't know what to think through in those mitigating risks, but that is incredible, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you set yourself up for oh crap, now I've just kind of screwed myself as I'm in this partnership. And these are really huge life lessons in terms of a partnership that can be beneficial and then go quickly awry.
Yeah, I would say ask. I mean, find a partnership that you respect, or it's maybe in a similar, maybe not exactly the same category, but a similar category. Um, and ask questions about, hey, how has this worked for you? You've been in this long term partnership. What's worked? What hasn't? What would you do differently if you were writing this contract today? um, I feel like, particularly in the university space now, universities are very open to sharing information. But even when I was in the corporate world, I think generally reaching out and asking a few questions can go a long way. It builds relationships, and it does give you those ideas of, hey, here's something I might not have thought about that I can watch out for.
You are have amazing experience in brand partnerships, working for incredible companies. What other successful examples or lessons learned can you share about brand partnerships that have resulted in significant growth, or just key insights that you can share with us?
Um, One thing I think is that seems like a small thing and is easy to get missed is really thinking about your joint messaging. I had a situation where, with a certain brand, when I was consulting, where I was working with a pretty well known baseball player, and I planned to picture him in a non branded pinstripe uniform. So you might guess what team that would be. And his team then informed me that they considered the pinstripes to be part of their trade dress and therefore protected. So I proceeded to show them how many teams actually do have pinstripes in their uniform set, and it's several. Um, and they essentially told me that, yes, we're aware of that, and you would probably win in court, but we can afford to tie you up in court and hold up your campaign. So figure out another way. So again, it comes back to thinking through what you're trying to message, how you're trying to use that partnership with that player in this case, where your messaging is going to be. So, just again, a lot of considerations to think through ahead of time.
Yeah, that's that's a pretty funny example, right? And it brings up a point, right, where this company was like, yeah, I can hold you up in court. So one of the advantages of working with a brand partnership is the the brand coverage, the brand awareness that they can bring to a smaller or less known brand, right? Perfect Barbie, right? These brands have come on board to get this brand coverage. So how do you ensure, if you're this smaller brand trying to do that, ensure that your goals and your metrics are being met in this larger scope of this brand partnership?
Um, I think that it's a challenge when if you're signing up to work with somebody who's much bigger than you are and much more well known, then I think a small brand is going to be challenged to do that. However, one of the things I think will be interesting about the Barbie results is there's kind of three buckets that I'm interested in seeing. One is the bucket of brands that were actually in the movie, so product placements like Chanel and the other brands that were in the movie. The second is brands that may have had commercial rights or product rights for, um, a Sephora product that's co-branded with Barbie, let's say. And the third one is what I call kind of the periphery brands, the ones that maybe chose not to do a full-on partnership with Mattel or with Barbie or with the movie, but they launched a series of pink products. So they're capitalizing on, sort of the trend that is due to Barbie, but not necessarily tied to the name. It'll be interesting for me to see kind of those three buckets. Like I said, once we get past the holiday time period and how each one of them is done. And then the challenge for a company like Mattel and a brand like Barbie is, how do they ensure that there's so much value in the partnership with them and with their name that you discourage kind of these peripheral launches that, maybe didn't pay you what you were asking for, but still got a bump because they were kind of on the tailwinds of it. So that's how both, a solid brand partnership like that, a large company should want to make sure that they're delivering on objectives for a big company or a small company. So,
and I like what you're saying, because you want to create a successful partnership on both sides, right? To continue that long-term relationship. So, what does trust play in terms of an overall partnership?
trust plays just like trust and communication, they go hand in hand. So it's a huge part. Like I said, you need, if one side's not delivering on objectives, that needs to be communicated early on so that frustration doesn't build, so that the other side has the chance to address it. If one side feels like, hey, I don't feel like you're treating me like a partner because you have all these demands all the time, this feels more like a transactional relationship and not a strategic relationship. Those kinds of issues need to be communicated. Regular check-ins, like I said, the day-to-day people need to be talking at least weekly, if not multiple times a week, depending on what's going on. At least quarterly check-ins at a senior level, and probably an annual check-in at a executive CEO type level, just so that, again, keeping everybody aligned and on the same page. And two organizations with two different boards and two different sets of priorities in lockstep is not easy, but it's worth it in the long run.
And as we look forward with the highs and the lows of brand partnerships that we've seen recently, from Barbie to some of the backlashes that we've seen with brand partnerships, what future trends are you foreseeing in brand partnerships?
The one that I would like to see, and I think the jury's out a little bit, is cause-based naming rights. So I love what Climate Pledge Arena has done, where Amazon paid, in the range of 300 to 400 million for the naming rights to the new hockey arena in Seattle, and then didn't put their name on it, which is, that's a pretty baller move, to put a cause on the arena instead of their name. I would love to see that trend in naming rights take off, because I think there's way more value in promoting a cause than necessarily just putting your name on a building. Beyond that, the other area that I think we're going to continue to see a lot of evolution is in the name, image, likeness space for college athletes, so NIL. Everybody's still figuring out what the rules of the game are and how to be successful at it. So student athletes, universities, and brands are still figuring out what this looks like. I feel like it's unusual for a college athlete to have much name recognition and awareness outside of their local market and not tied to their university marks. So that's an opportunity for universities to partner with athletes. There are some who have done a fabulous job at building an NIL sponsorship portfolio. Libby Dunn is one. She's the top female athlete now. Last year she was the top athlete overall, but even she ran into some issues last year with some of her fans coming to a game and some other things that she had to figure out how to navigate. So it's a lot to expect a 20 or 21-year-old to manage their social media the way a brand would expect, to potentially turn down partnerships that aren't aligned with their brand. So students need to make sure they're getting really good advice, and brands need to think about the long-term play. So the window while a student is in college is pretty short, and then you might have a couple of different options when they graduate. They might go pro, but they might also remain an influencer. They could become a coach. They could be still in the business and valuable to you as a brand in another way. So I think, once the student graduates, being ready to pivot in whatever direction they take, because they're still going to have millions of followers that are going to be valuable to a brand that built a relationship with them while they were a student. So I think next steps there to be determined. But like I said, lots of people sort of still figuring it out.
Those are great examples on both ends of the spectrum on the future. Everyone, jot down Christine's name, go reach out to her on LinkedIn. She has amazing depth, knowledge, expertise. Customize your request. Tell her that you saw her here on Marketing Table Talk. You definitely want to connect with her. We are going to take a question here from Michael, who asks, how do brands maintain consistent messaging and values while collaborating with another brand that may have a different identity and positioning?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think this one goes back to, I mean, being core to your values is really where this one falls, because you can come up with messaging that makes sense for both parties if you stay core to the values. A good example of this one that I love from the nonprofit space is Make-A-Wish and Disney. That partnership goes back to 1980, with the first wish that was granted was a trip to Disneyland. Now 1 in 2 of their wishes are Disney corporate wishes throughout the whole Walt Disney organization. Um, it works for both, because obviously when you wish upon a star, you get a trip to Disneyland, and it just fits. It works for Make-A-Wish because Disney has such vast media reach and communication potential. So Make-A-Wish can communicate their brand values. They can clarify the misconception that they're just about terminal children, and they're not. They're about um, critically ill children, not just terminal. So it, you know, again, aligning on it starts at aligning on values. If you start there, you can figure out what the messaging is going to look like.
It's such a great point about aligning on values, because it sets both companies up for success in the heightened sensitivity that we're seeing around brand partnerships with the backlash. I love it. Let's take one other question, because we're seeing a lot here. Let's see. Great. Duncan, really interesting discussion. He's saying, I think partnership is so important in all aspects of business. It is. And we talked about that earlier, about the strategic approach, where depending on what you're trying to do, bringing in new customers through innovation with Krispy Kreme and M&M, that's a great strategic approach where you can go through brand partnerships, or disrupting innovation with the Coca-Cola Freestyle example by coming up with a great innovative approach with partnering with a company. Partnerships is definitely a strategic approach in doing that. Here's a question from Fabio. Lisa, the partner location is a key to selected them?
I don't think so. I mean, it depends. Again, it depends on the strategy. If you are, let's say, you are, you know, a bank trying to launch into a new market. So in that case, yes, you would definitely want to think about finding a partner that had a stronghold in that marketplace and a lot of name awareness and a lot of name recognition, if that was your goal. But in general, I don't necessarily, particularly for national partnerships, I don't feel that it really matters where they're located. What matters more is the positioning of the brand, the values of the brand, the alignment of the mission.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Guys, thank you so much. Again, reach out to Christine, customize your quest. She has such great knowledge, depth. She's a powerhouse in brand partnerships. Thank you for watching another episode of Marketing Table Talk. Tune in next time on September 27th for another episode when we talk about cultivating engaged brand communities. Thanks again.